Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see everyone on this chilly Saturday morning. My name is Kathy Linatra, and I am the Rep-elect State Representative for the 12th Plymouth District. And I have, thank you. Thank you. I have the honor and the privilege of introducing my mentor, former Senate President Therese Murray.
That was a long walk. I could have come in the other way. And aren't we thrilled to have Kathy Linatra as our new rep? So good morning, and so glad you're all here. Welcome, and thanks for being here. In my office at the State House, I had a plaque that sat behind my desk that read, "Well-behaved women really make history." For me, that plaque and that saying was a constant reminder that in order to effect real change, you need to speak up and refuse to be silenced by critics. That if you know something is the right thing to do, you cannot stop fighting for that. I believe that the meaning behind that saying sums up our senior senator, Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren's commitment to all of us is as strong today as it was when I first met her at the late Reverend Peter Gomes' house here in Plymouth in 2012. That evening, we were able to talk, and I knew then and there that she would be a champion for all of us in Washington. I knew she wouldn't allow critics to silence her as she fought to make our state and our nation a better place. And I knew that when she stepped onto Capitol Hill, it would never be the same. She would shake things up. She would persist. Now, more than ever before, we need to be confident that there is someone in Washington looking out for us, for our children, our friends, our neighbors, and our community. Someone who speaks out against injustice. Someone who gets up every day and fights for the values that we here in Plymouth and across the Commonwealth hold dear. Equal protection, equal rights, and equal opportunity for all. And that someone is Senator Elizabeth Warren. So please, join me in welcoming our Senator, Elizabeth Warren. I'm going to give you one more thing. Yes. The Plymouth 400 thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sit down. Thank you. And I'm getting my Plymouth 400 here. No, that is not the number of Democrats in Plymouth. No. This is coming up on a big anniversary. And we are working, Senator Markey and I, on a commemorative coin for this, raising money around this. So, good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate all you have done and all you are doing. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the kind invitation. You know, here we are. It is beautiful out. It's cold, but it's beautiful. It's sunny. It's gorgeous. There's a big basketball game going on just down the hall in the gym. And you're in here to talk about policy. I love being from Massachusetts. This is great. So I just want to start by saying thank you. I know we're here after the election. Usually you get everybody lined up before the election because it's all about elections. But I wanted to be here with all of you for two reasons. One is to say thank you. Thank you for all of your engagement in 2018, and I appreciate it for those of you who are involved in the Senate race, for any other races up and down the ballot, how important they are for the questions. Win or lose, I'm grateful that you got engaged because I think that democracy is really under assault. And the only way we're going to make it work is if we all start pitching in and making our voices heard. The second reason I wanted to be here is to talk just a little bit about government. So I just wanted to talk for a minute, and then I'm going to take as many questions as I can. We'll do questions down here. John's going to come in and get everybody organized for questions. And then at the end, if anybody wants to, we'll take pictures. I'll stay as long as anyone wants to. But I wanted to talk for just a minute at the top about, I want to talk about the opioid crisis. 188 people will die today. Think about that. That's like a plane crash. And it will happen again tomorrow, and it will happen the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. These numbers are getting worse, not better. And here's the thing. If someone came to you, a beloved daughter, a sister, a brother-in-law came to you and said, I know I have a problem and I need help, do you realize that across this country right now, they would have a less than 1 in 6 chance of getting the medical treatment they need? And the reason for that is not because we don't know what people need. The reason for that is that as a country right now, we just won't spend the money. So I've been over to High Point, and they're doing a great job, and I'm grateful for the work they do. I've been to our community health centers throughout this region, and they are doing a terrific job. But they're very limited in how many people they've got, how much space they've got, how much they can put into trying to help the people who need help, and to give them the full range of services that people need. This is a tough one to kick. So over time. And the reason I want to start and talk about that is we could fix this. This is not something that, God, this just happened and what can we do about it? We could fix this. I was talking with Elijah Cummings. Some of you may know him. A congressman from Maryland. Baltimore's been hit really hard by this opioid crisis. And we talked about the AIDS crisis back in the late 1980s and how much today the opioids crisis looks like that. That is, the numbers kept going up, and the federal government, which is where the real resources are, just kind of kept nibbling around the edges and do a little more, but never enough. And then a little boy, and it was the kind of thing, people didn't want to talk about it. It was somebody else's problem. It was stigmatized. And a little boy named Ryan White, some of you may remember, announced that he had AIDS. And America turned at that point. Democrats and Republicans came together and said, wait a minute, this is a serious medical problem, and we need to fight back. And the federal government put up the resources to advance the research, but to provide for the treatment all across this country. And you watch the numbers turn around and start to drop. And AIDS is still a problem. It's still out there. But there are people alive today with AIDS. There are people who never contracted AIDS because as a country, we came together and said, this is a serious problem facing our country. We're going to pitch in some resources, and we're going to turn this around and make it better. We need to do the same thing with opioids. And so I go talk to my colleagues, Republican colleagues, and say, help me do a bipartisan bill on this. You have a problem in your state too. You have problems where you live too. And right now, the response I get is, you're right, it's a terrible problem, but we can't spend any more money. And here's the unspoken part, because we just gave away $1.5 trillion in giveaways, tax giveaways to giant corporations and billionaires. And so the money we would need, which is not nearly that much, to be able to deal with this crisis, we just don't have that money. So we'll pass laws that'll try to be helpful, but not really spend the money, because it just takes money. You've got to have enough beds, you've got to have enough people to treat. It's just not going to be there. And the reason I start there is to say, first of all, this is a fight we've all got to stay in. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. I don't care about anything. These are human beings. This is a medical problem, and it's a medical problem facing our country, collectively, all of us. But the second is to say, this is one more example of this fundamental question right now in America: who does government work for? Is it only going to work for the rich and the powerful, or can we make it work for everyone, even those who have serious problems? And for me, that's what this fight is all about. I think it is wrong for the federal government to give away $1.5 trillion to billionaires and giant corporations, and then turn around and say people who are sick and have problems cannot get the help they need. So, here's the deal. Elections are over, and the first person who tells me how many days it is until the next round of elections, I'm going to have something snarly to say. But we got to stay engaged in our democracy. We've got to stay engaged on a core set of issues that, for me, keep intersecting at this fundamental question of who government works for. So you may have come here today, some of you, in fact, let me just ask, you know someone who has a drug problem or have lost someone? Yeah, look how many hands around here. You may have come here today because you're worried about student loan debt. You may, yeah, I get it. You may have come here today, I see the t-shirts, because you care about gun safety and that no child should have to worry about being shot going to school or on the playground. You may have come here today because you live in a community that's pretty close to the ocean, and that climate change is the not only immediate threat here, but the existential threat to this earth. You may have come here for any one of different specific issues, and we talk about as many of them as you want. But the heart of it, where it all intersects, is this basic question about who you think government should work for. Right now, government works. I mean, do understand this. People say, oh, it's gridlock. No. Government is working great. When they wanted to pass a tax giveaway to billionaires and to giant corporations, bang, I mean, they got it done. They lined up every single vote they needed. Every single Republican in the House, every single Republican in the Senate said, I can sure sign up for that, baby. So understand, you can make government work. It's just that right now, it works for big oil. It works for gun manufacturers. It works for big drug companies. It works for a lot of folks who can hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers, who can be there not only in Congress, but also in the agencies. Oh, government works for those at the top. It works for the wealthy. It works for the well-connected. I am in this fight because I believe government needs to work for everyone else, and that's why I'm here today. So that's what it's about for me. Thank you. So thank you. So let's do this. Let's do some questions. Let's talk about whatever it is you most want to talk about. John, can you come out here? Isn't it John who's going to do our, you got it. He's got the Easter basket here. Okay, it looks like. Okay.
Great, Senator.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I'm John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds for the county. I was telling Senator Murray earlier and Senator Warren that if it had been a weekday, I could have walked across the street from the Registry of Deeds. But it's always great to be on the stage with Senator Warren, Representative Kathy Lenatra, our newest member of the Plymouth County delegation, and
stand up, Kathy. Come on, stand up. Say hello to everybody.
in having served for so many years with Senator Murray, it was so important to have the Senate president from Plymouth County and the first woman state Senate president, Senator Murray. So my role here today is to moderate the questions upon entry into the facility today, and I will say it's a beautiful facility, and thank you to the Plymouth Public Schools for continuing to maintain it. When you came in, you were offered a ticket with a number on it if you wanted to ask a question. I have those tickets in a basket. I'll choose the numbers at random. When I call your number, please come down to one of the microphones, and I guess there's some wandering microphones around the hall. And if you could state your name, that would be very great, and ask your question. I'm going to call 3 numbers at a time so we can keep the program moving today. We'll try to get as many questions as we can, but I'd ask you to ask 1 question so we can get to as many people as possible. And we will get through as many numbers as we can.
Okay, get some numbers
Okay.
back there. Okay.
We'll make sure those get taken
We'll
care
add
of.
to it.
So can
We got some help here.
we get somebody with some tickets?
Some people are moving. Okay, back there.
But in the meantime, I'll get started by calling 3 numbers. And again, if you didn't get a ticket, we'll get your number in the basket.
You good, yeah?
So the first number is, and I'm just going to try to read the last 4 numbers. 8231. Can you raise your hand so we know where you are?
We have a
8231.
winner. Come on down.
Come on down. 8228.
There we go. Come on
Raise
down.
your hand. Come on down. Like the price is right. 8240. Those will be the first 3
There we
questioners.
go. Okay. So,
So-
we'll get started and we'll do some more. Does that
Yeah,
work?
please state your name and then ask your question.
Okay. So my name is Andrea Clary.
Hi, Andrea.
So I should have been able to go second because, this is, daunting.
The
yeah,
pressure's
winner, winner,
on.
chicken dinner.
This is
Here we
it.
go.
But we're
All
all
right.
rooting for you, Andrea.
All right,
okay.
So mine might be kind of a comment, see if you can add
Sure.
any elaboration. Would
Okay.
be a frustrating feeling I often have is it seems like those of us who are more liberal tendencies, who want government to work for all people, say, are just losing the discourse in when there is a debate about sensible gun or healthcare, et cetera, whatever it is. When we try to have some sort of a debate, we just the Republicans seem they line up. They have concise talking points. That's what repeal and replace without any well, let's get specific. So we lose the arguments in the media marketplace, it seems. So do you have any comment about that?
So that's an interesting point, Andrea. So let me do both halves. Yes and no. I'm learning politics, right? I'll give both halves to the answer. The first half is, I know it's frustrating, and I know that sometimes you feel like, how could anybody want to turn away from my sister who's sick, from my grandma who's in a nursing home, and you want to take away Medicaid? That's 2 out of every 3 seniors in nursing home. How could you want to do this? And I know that makes it frustrating. But the other half of this is, I'm going to push back on your premise here. I actually think we are starting to win this public debate. And I'll tell you why I think that. This last round in the election, the number 1 issue was health care. And a lot of Republicans who voted to repeal health care for millions of Americans, and by the way, didn't just vote to repeal health care, voted to repeal it and then high-fived each other. Think about what that meant. Said, I'm not only gonna roll back the things that were added in the Affordable Care Act, they also went on the attack after Medicaid. And can I just make a little side pitch here for Medicaid? Because here's where I blame Democrats for not having talked enough about what Medicaid does. 2 out of every 3 seniors in a nursing home is counting on Medicaid to keep them there. Your neighbor who uses a walker maybe or a wheelchair and has a home health aide who drops by a couple of hours a day, so that means she gets to stay in her home instead of having to go to an institution. That's Medicaid. And your niece who had the baby that was born that ran up $1 million in medical debts in the first month, even If the parents have health insurance, it's Medicaid that comes in and helps pay for the extraordinary parts, for the breathing equipment and for the feeding equipment and for the special therapists that that baby's going to need to be able to survive. That's Medicaid. And Medicaid goes right to this heart, as you say, about who government works for. None of us knows whose grandma's going to outlive her savings. None of us knows who's going to get hit by a bus. None of us knows who's going to have the baby that runs up $1 million in medical bills. So what we all do is we all pitch in some money so that if it does hit you, we're all here to help backstop it. That's what Medicaid is about. That's what government is about. That's what we do together. And my view is we didn't win nearly enough of those fights, but we won a lot of fights in 2018, right at that intersection. Pre-existing conditions, access to affordable health care, drug costs, the cost of prescription drugs, and Medicaid, right at that intersection. And I think that's because we talked about something that matters to a lot of people where they live, and we talked about the role of government in it. So I know it's frustrating. I get it, Andrea, but I really do think the answer is we keep talking about the parts we care about. We try to make it as clear and as personal as we can. I think that's how we make a real difference. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's helpful. Good. Thank you. Thank you. We got
So
another
the
one?
next questioner, could you please identify yourself and maybe where you're from?
From Halifax.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. So
That's okay.
First of all, thank you for being a strong advocate for impolite, arrogant women everywhere.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, so there's a feeling of hopelessness. It's everywhere. I feel like there's a lot of issues that I feel like you know, everyone feels strongly, but kind of then retreats to their own corners.
Yep.
And there's no reaching across the aisle. You know, like you said, you know, all of the Republicans are, this is how I'm feeling, and you know, I'm not willing to cede any ground. Same with the Democrats. It's happening on both sides. How do you speak to that feeling of hopelessness, and how can we continue to move forward and get things done with people feeling like they just want to fight the other side?
Okay. All right. It's a good question. It's a good question. You're asking a fighter who truly understands, no, this is important. I'm not in it just because of fighting. It's in it to try to make things better. That's the whole point. So I'm going to tell you a story. 44 million people in America have hearing loss. Anybody in here have hearing loss? Or love someone who has a hearing loss? Yeah, a lot more hands went up on that one, right? And the guy said, what? Okay, good. Okay, 44 million people in America have hearing loss. Fewer than 1 in 6 actually gets hearing aids to help them. And you know why? Because they cost a lot of money. I just saw the other day, a pair of hearing aids on average is about $4,400. Think about that. And they're not covered by most health insurance. They're not covered by Medicare. So a lot of folks just do without. Now, there are real health consequences to doing without. It's not just that you turn up the TV louder. People who have hearing loss are socially isolated. They don't talk as much to their family, to their grandchildren. A lot of folks don't want to go out to the stores because they're afraid they're not going to understand. They get nervous about driving their cars. There are real consequences to this. So the question you ought to ask yourself is, why in the heck do hearing aids cost so much money? Right? Why do they cost tons more than a phone? Phone's a lot more complex, right? Has a lot more going on. It's just a little bit of hardware. I'll tell you the reason. The reason is because there are just a very small number of hearing aid companies, and they have managed to keep the laws wrapped up basically to protect their monopolies, okay? It's a little complicated, but that's the basic story. So I talked to some folks about this, some scientists about, is there any danger to selling hearing aids over the counter? And the answer is no. You know how you buy eyeglasses over the counter? You can buy them pretty cheap, right? Or you can go get the expensive ones if you want. That's fine. But the point is there's something available if your needs are kind of basic, that you can just buy over the counter cheap. So I said, could you do the same thing with hearing aids? And the scientists and the doctors all over, they said, sure, you absolutely could do this. And of course, if you sold it over the counter, think about what that means. The market, remember where I started this? 44 million people, okay? And at least 5 out of 6 care about the price on this, and that would make a big difference for them. So I thought, you know what? This is a place where you can make a difference with federal law, because you can do an override of tangled state and federal laws and just pass a law that says nobody can interfere with the sale of hearing aids over the counter. So I put together a bill on this, and I got all the scientists to sign on, the doctors to sign, the audiologists to take a look at it, make sure we had it just right. And what's the first thing I did when I got this bill together? I very quietly called a Republican, very senior Republican, who said, what? But said, you know, Elizabeth, that is a darn good idea. And so I said, great, sign me up. So we decided to become co-sponsors. I said, who else can I call? And I kept calling Republicans until I got a bunch of them signed on, then got a bunch of Democrats signed on, all below the radar screen, all out of hearing of the hearing aid companies. At one point, the NRA did come out in opposition. That's true. Really? But they did. They did. And that worried some folks. But the point was, we got a lot of folks signed on before it ever became public. And we got it hooked on to a bill that was starting through Congress. And it has now been signed into law. I just met with FDA last week. They're going to have new regs next year. Now, yes. Yeah. So, coming to you. So here's the deal. Here's the lesson I take away from that. It's not that people are just locked in and never want, there are a few people like that, but not many. That really is not where most people are. Most people would like to get some stuff done, right? Some things we can come to work together on and that we should be able to do. The problem we've got right now in Washington is that this government has been captured. And it's doing too much of the bidding of those with money. It's not just that we're a bunch of cranky people there, it's that the oil companies want an EPA that's non-functional. And the big polluters, the folks who dump crap in the Housatonic River, right? They just don't want an effective and functioning EPA, and they're the ones driving what happens in Washington. The giant financial institutions don't want bank regulators who are saying, wait, you're doing what kinds of loans again? What kind of risk are you taking on? That didn't work out so well 10 years ago. They don't want regulators like that. The billionaires and the giant corporations, they wanted those tax breaks. That's money, right? And that juices the stock market. It helps for the CEOs make more money. So we've got a problem right now in Washington. And the problem is one of corruption. And it shows up in 1,000 different ways. It shows up, yes, in campaign contributions, you bet. It shows up in dark money, the ads that never become public, who paid for them. But it shows up in so many more ways. It shows up in the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. That Gary Cohn, remember Gary Cohn? So Donald Trump gets elected, said, after having said, Goldman Sachs, big problem, right? And what does he immediately do? He hires everybody from Goldman Sachs to come work in Washington. And one in particular, Gary Cohn, hires a bunch of people from Goldman Sachs, but Gary Cohn in particular. Gary Cohn been an executive at Goldman Sachs, and he brings him in to do tax policy. We know how that turns out, right? We know where this story's going to end, but I want you to think about how this story starts. What does Goldman Sachs do as Gary leaves? They give Gary about $250 million. Think about that. They make a gift to him that they did not have to make. And they give him, I think of it as a pre-bribe, before he leaves Goldman Sachs to go write tax policy that will affect Goldman Sachs. And indeed, good investment, because after the new tax bill passes, immediately Goldman Sachs in the first year makes back about $250 million in tax relief. And of course, it will be the gift that keeps on giving for them into the future. So I could name a whole lot of other ways that this happens. People who work in Congress who are looking at their next jobs, right? The way the revolving door works. So here's my pitch back on the answer to the question. First, we can work together. There really are. There are things to be done. There are things people want to do together. But the second is we got to break this notion that the people in control are the people with all the money, and that they get to call all the shots, and that they are the ones who pull all the strings. And that's why I'm out here doing a town hall on a Saturday morning in December. It's because there are a whole lot more of us than there is of them. And if we stand up, if we use our voices, if we keep showing up at the polls, if we keep protesting, if we keep writing, if we keep sending emails, if we keep posting on Facebook, if we keep tweeting, the change, Andrea, has already started, and we will accelerate that change, and we will take our government back and make it work for the people again. That's what I believe. I believe that.
So would you please state your name and where you're from, the third question in the first round?
Good morning, Senator Warren. Thank you so much for coming
Sure.
to Little Plymouth.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm Dr. Kathy Murray, a solo practitioner. I'm also one of the Plymouth delegates for Mass Medical Society. So I represent this county for Mass Medical Society. And I'm Dr. Murray. I'm no relation to Teresa Murray, unfortunately, but great name. Anyway, I'm asking if you have any ideas about pharmacy benefit managers and getting drugs. Do you have any ideas whether we could use market forces to curb the power and chaos of pharmacy benefit managers in not getting us as people, and our patients, the drugs they need? And thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. So, PBMs, as they're known in the trade, are the folks between the drug manufacturers and the drugstore where you get your prescription filled. And they have become, in many cases, like a giant black box that the drug companies put the drugs in and the prices come out on the other side, and nobody understands what happens in between, except that somebody's making a whole lot of money in between and driving healthcare decisions in terms of which prescriptions to use in terms of their negotiations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly change the question if I can and make the point, yes, we should, and I've been in a whole bunch of trying to dig in further on what's happening with pharmacy benefit managers, but I just want to say something overall about prescription drugs, and that is this market is not working. It's just not working. And that means we got to make some big changes. I'll tell you an example. I was doing a town hall maybe a couple of months ago in Worcester. And a guy named Steve stands up to ask his question. He holds his arm up. And he said, "See that rash?" I said, "Yeah." And I could see it. And he said, itchy, painful. And he said, guess how much the ointment costs to just try to treat it and keep it under control. And I know it's going to be a big number, right? I'm standing there thinking, $100? Over $7,000. Now think about that. And here, the key, doesn't matter whether Steve is paying it personally whether we're paying it as taxpayers or whether the insurance company is paying it and then raising premiums. The point is, over $7,000 for an ointment, for a rash? Are you kidding me? What's wrong here? Americans are paying astronomical numbers for their prescription drugs. And here's the deal. You go to Canada for a lot of these drugs, and the same drug, same safety, same control over it, costs a fraction of what it costs here in the United States. So I'm going to make a little market forces push here, okay? Because I believe in markets. But let's do a couple of things with markets. The first one is, how about we get a little competition? And that is for same drugs. You can buy them here in the US or you can buy them in Canada, right? Because that'll help bring prices down. So there's a market piece. Or how about a second one? And that is that the federal government, when we're doing Medicaid reimbursement, or Medicare reimbursements, both, we should be able to negotiate with drug companies rather than just having drug companies name their price. So I think there's a lot we could do to help bring down prices. But I want to go back to a third one, and that is looking at this the other way around. Nobody knows who's going to have the next serious medical problem that instead of taking $70 to fix it, it takes $7,000 to try to keep it under control. And this is where we have to think about, again, this question about how we all pitch in for all of us. So I have a bill right now that proposes that we just cap how much individuals pay out of pocket for prescription drugs. And my proposal is $250 for an individual a month. It's still a high number for a lot of folks. $500 for a family. But to get the idea out there that you only have to pay so much, and when you hit that much, that we're all going to be in this one together, that we cannot sink families over the cost of prescription drugs. So it's another approach to it that I think we can at least talk about. Everybody should be able to get it. Good. So who have we got, John? Have we got three more here?
Next round, I'd like to call 8226 to the microphone.
And I'll try to do
8226.
shorter on my answers. Okay.
And then 8222. And the third one would be 8207. Please come down to the microphone. State your name and where you're from.
Okay. Want to start? Here we go. We've got two. Come on down. Come on. Oh, one more over here. Sorry, I missed you over there. Okay, who's starting? Here we
Hi,
go.
Senator Warren. My name is Charlotte Simpson.
Hi, Charlotte.
I'm from Pembroke. And in October, I hand-delivered a letter signed by 50 experts on trauma and attachment, one to your office and one to 17 additional senators on the Hill. And I want to thank you as the only person to personally respond and send me a letter. So, back. I have a follow-up question,
Sure.
two-part. I'll call it a two-part question instead of two questions. One is, what is the status of the Senate investigation into the long-term effects of child separation and detention? Is that happening? They said it would be. And also, what can we do, and what are you doing here in Massachusetts to support people seeking asylum and refugees?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Charlotte. So the status of the ongoing investigation right now is that there's a group that's formed. I'll go back and check again on Monday. I haven't seen any activity yet. Now that may mean that people are just still kind of getting organized and working at a less public level, but but I will check. I promise I'll check and follow up with you. So thank you again for your interest in that. You know, we have laws in the United States. We have laws about people who seek asylum, people who seek refugee status, people who seek to immigrate. I want to see us enforce those laws. The idea that the President of the United States single-handedly can shut down a border or tell people who are seeking asylum that the United States refuses to listen to them is legally wrong and morally wrong. And when he tries to do this, we have to call him out, and I will continue to do that. So I'm going to stay on this. There are others who will as well. The United States has an obligation to be a world leader, and the best way we lead is by example. The behavior that has gone on down at the border in particular, but some of it right here internally, right here in Massachusetts, neither makes us safer nor reflects our values. And so I believe we should keep enforcing the law, but that also means that we treat people who come here to ask for asylum or refugee status or immigrants with dignity and according to the law, and we hear them out. So I'm going to stay on that. Thank you. Thank you. Hi. Where are we going?
Yeah,
Over here.
Go to the
Okay.
right, yeah.
Senator Warren, my name is Al. We have let the Republicans set the agenda
Yeah.
that big government is bad, that the government is the problem, not the solution, that the 9 worst words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." When are Democrats going to do something to turn that issue around and point out that the Consumer Finance Protection Board has done good things for people,
Yes.
and that the Republicans are trying to destroy it?
Yes.
When are we going to talk about how food stamps are helping people eat who otherwise wouldn't be able to eat? Why are we letting all these things become evil when they are really good? You are losing the battle because this overriding issue of big government affects everything else in the world of politics today. We've got to take that back somehow.
So thank you, Al. It's a great question. You know, this big government, small government, I've heard this a zillion times. My 3 brothers, I grew up in Oklahoma. My 3 brothers are all still there. 2 of my 3 brothers are Republicans. You know, this is how it works. And part of what we talk about is they keep wanting to run this play of big government versus small government. It's a lie. This isn't about big government versus small government. These guys are for gigantic government. It's who it works for. It's who gets helped. That's the part that matters. This is not big versus small. And understand this. Much of the argument, oh, let's go with small government. You know what that means? Let's go with small government. Let's go with small government, meaning tell the bank regulators to back off. That's small government. Yeah, small government as in people got cheated on mortgages, right? And they blew up the entire economy, these giant financial institutions, and they loved small government. Now, when they blew up the entire economy, their response was to say, hey, you better do something to help us out here, because if you don't, this economy is never coming back. And all of a sudden, the folks who were for small government liked a $700 billion bailout for giant financial institutions, right? That isn't about big government versus small government. It's about who government works for. That is the central thesis. And so what we have to do, I think, is change this narrative again. And the narrative is about, is government working for America's working families, or is government just working for those at the top? Let me do I'll try to do this really short, but let me do the short version of this. When Franklin Roosevelt comes in, Great Depression is on, people said, we've been a boom and bust economy, which was true, since the late 1700s. That's just how it is. Franklin Roosevelt said, no, I think we can use the tools of government to make this country work better for everyone. And what tools did he use? Think about it. He used the tools of regulation, FDIC insurance, make it safe to put money in banks. Glass-Steagall, break up the biggest financial institutions so no one of them has too much power. And SEC, back when we built it in the 1930s, put a tough cop on the beat on Wall Street. They worked. What else did we do? We said progressive taxation. The more you got, right, everybody pays a fair share, and then take that money and reinvest it in building a future for everyone. So we reinvested that money over the next 40 years in what? In highways, right? National Transportation Highway System. We reinvested that money in a GI Bill. A grateful nation said to returning soldiers, we'll help you get an education. We reinvested in public education. We reinvested in, this is the amazing one, in research. We didn't know what it was going to yield, but we said, you know, we're going to build this pipeline of ideas because we believe our children and our grandchildren will profit from it. And it worked. You look from 1935 to about 1980, GDP goes up, and here's the deal. The 90% of America, everybody outside the top 10%, the 90% of America gets 70% of all the new income growth in this country. That was true for the upper middle class, the working class, the working poor, and the poor poor. We lifted all the boats. And then you hit about 1980. Ronald Reagan, trickle-down economics, two theories behind it. The first one was fire the cops. Not the cops on Main Street, the cops on Wall Street. Deregulate was the word they used, but it was roll back these regulators who were keeping the biggest corporations in check. Stop enforcing antitrust laws. Let the big get bigger and bigger and bigger. That was part one. And part two, cut taxes for those at the top. And when you do that, what happens? You end up with less money to invest in education, in basic infrastructure, in the roads and the bridges and power and water, in every one of those things, and less investment in research. And that great pipeline of ideas starts to get smaller. And what happens? 1980 to 2016, that's where we've got the latest numbers. What happens? GDP keeps going up. So there's your first part. GDP can go up under either set of circumstances. Where'd the new income growth go? Remember how 70% of new income growth had gone to the 90%, everybody outside the top 10%? 1980 to 2016, the 90% of America, how much of the new income growth, that rising stock market, that GDP that shot up, how much did the 90% get? Answer, zero. 100% of the new income growth, let's watch for fact checkers, it's actually 99.6%, so rounds to 100%. 100% of new income growth, 1980 to 2016, goes to the top 10%. Think about that. We have gotten richer as a country, but we haven't gotten richer as a people. It has all gone to the top. This is government, once again, working. Government rules matter. But right now, they have been captured by those who hire the lobbyists, the lawyers, make the contributions, and they have tilted the game so that the gains are going to those at the top. And that's what this fight is all about. That is the heart of what this fight is about. It's about how we make government work, not just for the rich and powerful, how we make it work for the rest of us. So thanks for the question, Al. I'll tell you this, I'm going to do this one town hall at a time until I get to tell this story over and over and over in America. So thank you. Thank you.
So, next questioner, please state your name and where you're from.
My name is Carrie. I'm from Plymouth, Mass.
Carrie,
Carrie.
it's good to see you.
Nice to see you too. First of all, I want to thank you for your support. I am one of the wives of, sorry. My husband works for National Grid.
Oh,
And it's been 6 months without his paycheck,
I know.
without our health insurance. And I want to thank you for standing up
You bet.
for us, for sending your letter. I can say that I do believe government works. Since the first bill was passed, asking for National Grid to cover insurance and the paychecks for the locked out workers, as opposed to sticking it on the citizens of Massachusetts. I guess my question is, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to other families where a corporation like National Grid, who just got a $1.5 billion tax break, a 14%, they also are posting record profits, yet they're trying to take it from the hardworking men and women that are down there doing the work every day.
Yeah, the
And
dangerous work.
to hold people's health care hostage for 6 months in order to bankrupt families into accepting their contract is just unconscionable.
Yeah.
And I know in Massachusetts, we're trying to pass bill to prevent that. What can we do nationally so that other families don't have to do this?
Okay.
For standing up for the little man against the corporate greed.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, I told the story, and another part to this story, I was trying to tell it fast. So I left out the importance of unions in this story. Again, let's just do the history on this. We all know I hope, our union history. Around the turn of the last century, the unions start developing, unions get stronger, workers start getting some rights, safety, wages, beginning to get it. Unionization is starting to go up, and the Great Depression hits, and unionization had already started to drop, and a lot of folks thought, with so many people out of work, at one point, 25% unemployment. With so many people out of work, the union movement in America will be dead. It's over. There will be no unions. Franklin Roosevelt, people in our government stood up and said, unions matter. In fact, Roosevelt said, if I were a working man, I'd belong to a union. And we passed laws to try to encourage unionization and to try to protect all workers. And I talk about unions because unions are the way to see best who's on the front lines fighting for workers. There's a bumper sticker I want to see someday, and that is The Weekend, brought to you by unions. Because that's how this has worked. Health care, paid by your employer, brought to you by unions. The 8-hour day, brought to you by unions. Workers' safety rights, brought to you by unions. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that now shows not only do unions boost the wages and the benefits and the safety conditions for union members, they boost them for everybody. So everybody has an interest in a strong union movement to help lead the fight on behalf of workers, and everyone has an interest in stronger laws to protect our workers. This has been one of the hardest parts for me about being in Washington right now, to watch this administration try to gut the Labor Department, the NLRB, so that worker safety, workers' wages, workers' leverage in negotiations is reduced over and over. And that's where it stands right now. That's the national fight that you ask about. But that's when we come to National Grid. And you've got the numbers right. So they get $1.5 billion in a tax break, right? A gift from the American taxpayers. Their profits are through the roof, and the answer is no. They don't want to pay for health insurance. They want to reduce how much they pay for health insurance for their workers. They want to create two-tier class of workers that the new people coming in will work for cheaper. will have fewer rights, will have less money. Why? Because the company's being stressed, it's under financial pressure? No, so that they can just make higher profits. That's all this is about. This is about working people who get out there, who do the work, the safety of our country, our people right here in Massachusetts, depends on the work that is done by our National Grid workers. And National Grid wants to just kick dirt in their faces. This is not right. This is a fight we should all be in. I've been on the picket lines with the National Grid workers. People in here ask me, what can you do to help? Go down and go to the picket line. Stand on the picket line with the National Grid workers. Show the folks at National Grid that we are not a country that says you can pick off a group of our workers and know that they're good family people, take away their health insurance, take away their income for 6 months, 8 months, a year, until you bring them to their knees. Because the fight that's going on at National Grid, mark my words, is coming to the next giant corporation and the one after that and the one after that. This truly is a moment in this country when we have to say, once again, there's a whole lot more of us than there is of them. And we don't want these corporations to boost their profits, to take big tax breaks, and then turn around and take it out of the hide of working people. So I'm with you all the way on this, and we're going to stay in this fight. I hope everybody comes down. Come on down. You bet. Who else has got a question?
So I'm told we have time for one more question.
I talked too long. Okay.
So would
go
number
one more.
8272 come down to the microphone, please?
Whoever got?
8272?
We got it?
Great.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, national greed. I like that. Okay. There we go. Okay.
Thank you very much for being here.
You bet.
Appreciate it. It's nice to see you. I work for a small nonprofit doing marine conservation. I have a heavy student debt load as part of that field, and I'm very concerned about the low rate of loan forgiveness in the first year of the public service loan forgiveness program. And I want to thank you for being an advocate for that program, for not letting it fall under the radar. There's a lot of us that took lower paying jobs to go into jobs we love, but that pay much less in order to do that. And it's a program that I think a lot of people should know about and support, because we're not just asking for handouts. People are giving back in other ways to the community. So thank you for your work with that. And I wanted to ask you what you thought about the low rate of forgiveness and how that program might get work for the next few years, basically.
Okay, good. So it's a good question. Can we just talk for a minute about student loan debt? Let's just talk about student loan debt for a second. So right now, there's $1.5 trillion outstanding in student loan debt. I just want you to think about that for a minute. $1.5 trillion. The debt load, think about this, is so enormous that every year, some people graduate and start paying down their debts, and there are people out there working who are paying down their debts. New freshmen come in and borrow some money, or sophomores for this next year. But the debt load is so giant, the interest rates are so high, and the default rates and deferment rates are so high that right now, that snowball of student loan debt is growing at a rate of $100 billion a year. And understand this about student loans. You can't get rid of them. They're not dischargeable in bankruptcy effectively. There are people whose wages are garnished on student loan debts, people who are having to make decisions. We're starting to watch it in the economy. There have been studies from the Treasury Department, from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, from the Fed, showing that young people, there's kind of an age at which you're expected to move out of your parents' home, an age at which you get an apartment, an age at which you buy a home, an age at which you may start a small business, that all of that is not happening the way it should. The numbers are down. And the numbers are down because of student loan debt. Now, for me, like I said, everything intersects in the same place around who government works for, but it's a perfect place for me to kind of wrap this thing up. Look, the economics, it's about families, it's about opportunity. And for me, this one is personal. I grew up in a real paycheck-to-paycheck family. My 3 older brothers all went off to the military. Me, I had a dream. From the time I was just a little girl, I wanted to be a public school teacher. I used to line my dollies up. Let's hear it for public school teachers. I used to line my dollies up. You know, I want you to know I was tough but fair. I don't think you did your homework last night. You know, I stayed on them, but it's all I wanted. And by the time I was the baby in the family, my mother referred to me as the surprise. I was about 30 before it hit me what that meant. A little slow on the uptake. But my folks didn't have the money for a college application for me, much less to send me off to school. And I have a very bumpy story about dropping out of school at 19, getting married to my first husband. My chance was a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. Yeah. And man, I grabbed that and I hung on for dear life. And at a price that I could pay for on a part-time waitressing job, I got a 4-year diploma and became a special needs teacher. That's opportunity. And here's the deal. I worked hard. Yeah, I worked hard. But kids today are working just as hard as I did. The difference is that $50 opportunity is not out there because America is not making the investments that it made a generation ago in helping any kid who wants to work hard, who wants a chance to build something. America's not doing that right now. Government is not working for them. Our country is not working for them. Instead, we've loaded them up with $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. And then the public service loan forgiveness program that you're talking about, this is a little slice out of it to say, okay, for some people who are going to have low-income jobs and work in public service, we're going to give away, we're going to help you with your debt. Make 10 years of payments, and at the end, whatever debt remains. So 10 years you've got to make these payments. But at the end, we'll get rid of the remaining debt. Turns out that in all these years, this program's been in place about 10 years now, the student loan servicers who work for the federal government didn't get people into the right programs. So now people are hitting their 10 years and discovering, oh, you were supposed to be 3 programs down. And if you really want to be able to get student loan debt forgiveness, okay, but you got to start at 0. You got 10 years ahead of you and all that you've done up to now. In other words, you know what it is? It's a way of saying we're going to do the absolute least minimum we possibly can for people who did what? Who tried to get an education and who've gone to work now in public service. That is wrong, that is obscene, and that is worth fighting back against. So on that one in particular, yes, I am huge in the fight on public service loan forgiveness. I've gotten $700 million set aside to plug one of the holes, but it's a big fight, and we're going to have to stay in it. But this is the part it comes down to at the end for me. I never in a million years thought I'd run for public office. This was not on my to-do list, my bucket list, not on any other list at all. I wanted to be a public school teacher. I ended up going to law school because I had babies, and I went to a public law school. It cost $450 a semester, and ended up back in teaching, just teaching a lot taller kids in law school, but always working on this fundamental question: what's happening to America's middle class? Watching those opportunities around education, watching those opportunities around good jobs where when a corporation did better, all the workers did better too. Watching those opportunities about when we make those investments in infrastructure, the good jobs it produces when we build those roads, when we build that power, seeing those opportunities year by year by year get narrower. What pulled me into this fight is gratitude. I am deeply grateful to an America that put opportunities in my reach. My daddy ended up as a janitor, and I got to be a college professor and a United States senator. I believe in what America can do. I believe in what we can do together. We just got to make this government get back in line with our best values and who we are as a people. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody want to do a picture? Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to do pictures? Thank you.
So on behalf of Senator Warren, former Senator Murray, soon to be sworn in as State Representative Kathy Lenatra, would like to thank you for participating in a democracy this morning. And Senator Warren will be available for a short time for photographs. If you'd like to have your photograph taken with the senator, we'd ask you to go up to the top of the auditorium and come down the ramp on this side over here.
Over there, just line up.
And line up.
For as long as anybody wants to.
And
it's
once
fine if you
again,
don't
thank
want
you
to.
all for coming.